Cucurbitophobia. I have a strange fear. You'll probably laugh when I tell you what it is, but you might feel differently after I tell you why I have it. I suffer from cucurbitophobia. The fear of pumpkins. Fears as specific and irrational as that usually begin in childhood and sometimes for no reason at all. But let me assure you, I have a very good reason to fear them. I sit here now typing this story as the living remainder of a set of twins. My name is Kalem, and I'll tell you the tragic story of my brother and the horror of what happened in the years since his untimely death. It happened when we were young, only 11 years old. We were an odd pair to see. We had the misfortune of being born with curious cowlicks of hair on top of our heads that would put alfalfa from the little rascals to shame. Our mother, much to our chagrin, called us her little pumpkins on account of our hair looking like little curled stalks. Our round little bellies didn't exactly help either. I was the calmer of us both, being reserved where my brother Kiefer was wild. He was the one who blurted out the answers in class and couldn't sit still. The risk-taker, the stuntman, the show-off. It usually fell to me, as the older and wiser sibling, to watch out for him. Though I was only a few minutes older, we were walking home one blustery autumn evening, the trees ablaze with gold and orange, as we huddled up from the chill of a cloudless dusk. Piles of leaves had been swept from the paths in the fear that they'd make an ice rink of the paths should it rain. The piles didn't last long as kids kicked them about and jumped into them for fun. Kiefer, of course, couldn't resist, running headlong into the first pile he saw. It happened so fast. Upsettingly fast, as death always does, without warning and without any power on my part to stop it. The swish of the leaves were punctuated with a crack, and Autumn's earthen gown was daubed in red, a rock. Just a poorly placed rock, probably put there as a joke by someone who didn't realize that it would change someone's life forever. The leaves came to rest, and I still hadn't moved. A freezing breeze blew enough aside for me to see what remained of my twin's head. Pumpkin seeds. It was a curious thought. I could only guess why the words popped into my head back then, but I know now that the smashed pumpkins on the doorsteps of that street seemed to mock my brother's remains. How the skull fragments and loose brain matter did indeed seem to resemble the inside of a pumpkin. I shook, but not from the cold, and I suppose the sight of me collapsed and shivering got enough attention for an ambulance to be called. I honestly don't recall what followed. It was a whirlwind of tears, condolences, and the gnawing fear that I would be punished for failing to protect my little brother. Punishment came in the form of never being called my mother's little pumpkin again. I was glad of it. The word itself and the season was associated with forever haunted me from that day on. But I never thought I would miss the affection of the nickname. At some point I shaved my hair, all the better to get rid of that stalk of mine. I couldn't bring myself to eat in the months after either, but that was okay. The thinner I got, the further away I could get from resembling my twin as he was when he passed, and further away from looking like the pumpkins that served as an annual reminder of that horrible day. Every time I saw pumpkins, even in the form of decorations, I would lose it. I would hyperventilate, feel so nauseous I could vomit, and I was flooded with adrenaline and an utterly implacable panic to do something to save my brother that I consciously knew had been gone for years. People noticed and laughed behind my back at my reactions. Word had inevitably spread of what happened, and I reckoned that people's pity was the only thing that saved me from the more mean-spirited pranks. For years, I went on as that weird skinny bald kid that was afraid of pumpkins. I began to go off the beaten path whenever I could in the run-up to autumn, taking long routes home in a bit to avoid any places where people might have hung up Halloween decorations. It was during one such walk that the true horror of my story takes place. It was early June, nowhere near Halloween, but my walks through the back roads and wooded trails of my hometown had become a habit and a great sanctuary throughout the hardest years of my life. It was a gray day, heavy and humid. Bugs clung to my sweat-covered skin. The dead heat brought me to panting as woods turned blue as dusk set in. Just as I was planning to make my way back to my car, I saw a light in the woods. Not other walkers, the lights flickered and were lined up invitingly. Was it some sort of gathering? Candles used in a ritual or campsite? I moved closer, pushing my way through bramble and nettles as I moved away from the path. A final push through the branches brought me right in front of the lights, and my breath caught in my throat. Pumpkins, tiny green pumpkins, each with a little candle placed neatly inside. The faces on each one were expertly carved despite the small size, eerily childlike with large eyes and tiny teeth. 1, 2, 3. I already knew how many. Somehow I knew. The number sickened me as I counted. 4, 5, 6. Don't let it be true. Let this be some weird dream. Don't let this be real, as I'm standing here shivering in the middle of nowhere, about to throw up with fear as I'm counting 9, 10, 11 pumpkins. My sweat in the summer heat turned to ice as I counted a baby pumpkin for every year my brother lived for. A chill breeze that had no place blowing in summer whipped past me, instantly extinguishing the candles. I was left there, shivering and panting in the dim blue of dusk. No one was around for miles. No one to make their way out here, placing each pumpkin, lovingly carving them, and lighting each candle. The scene was simply wrong. I felt watched despite the isolation. So when the bushes nearby rustled, my heart almost stopped dead. I barely mustered the will to turn my head enough to see more rustling. It has to be a badger, a fox, a roaming dog. It can't be anything else. But it was. A spindly hand reached forth, fingers tiny, but sharp as needles, clawing the rest of its sickening form forth from the bush. Nails encrusted with dirt, as if it dragged itself from the ground. A bulbous head leered at me from the dark, smile visible only as a leering void in the murky white outline of the thing's face. It was barely visible in what remained of dusk's light, but I could see enough to send my heart pounding. Its head shook gently in a mockery of infantile tremors, and I could feel its eyes regard me with inhuman malice. The candle flames erupted anew, casting the creature into light. Its face was like a blank mask of skin, with eyes and a mouth carved into it with the same tools and skill as that of the pumpkins. Hairless and childlike, it crawled forward, smiling at me with fangs that were just a crude sheet of tooth, seemingly left in its gums as an afterthought by whatever it was had carved its face. From its head protruded a bony spur, curved and twisting from an inflamed scalp like the stalk of a pumpkin. All reason left me as I sprinted from the woods. Blindly I ran through the dark, heedless of the thorns and nettles stinging at my skin. The pumpkin thing trailed after me somehow, crying 1 minute and giggling the next in a foul approximation of a baby's voice. I didn't dare look behind me to see how close it got to me, or what unsettling way its tiny body would have to move in order to keep up with me. Gasping for air and half-mad with fear, I made it to my car and sped back to the lights of town. I hoped against hope that I could get away before it could make it to my car. Hoped that it wouldn't be clinging underneath or behind it. It took me the better part of an hour to stop shaking enough to step out of the car. Nothing ever clung to my car, and I never had any trouble as long as I remained away from those woods. But that was only the first chase. The next would come months later. On none other than Halloween night, I had, by some miracle, made some friends. I suppose that in a strange way, that experience in the woods had inoculated me to pumpkins in general. After all, how could your average Halloween decoration compare to that thing in the woods? My new friends were chill, into the same things I was into. Pretty much everything I could want from the friends I never had from my years spent isolating. I even opened up to them about what happened to me and my not-so-irrational fear, which they understood without judgment and with boundless support. And so, when I was ultimately invited to a Halloween party, I felt brave enough to accept, with the promise of enough alcohol to loosen me up should the abundant decorations become a bit much for me. On the night, it wasn't actually that bad. I was nervous, as much about the inevitable pumpkin decorations as I was about being out of my social comfort zone. As I got talking to my new friends, mingling with people and having some drinks, I began to have fun. I even got pretty drunk. I didn't have enough experience with these settings to know my limits. I began to let loose and forget about everything. Until I saw him, I felt eyes on me through the crowds of costumed partygoers. Instinctively I looked and almost dropped my drink. A pale, smiling face, dirt, leering smile, powdery green leaves growing from his head, crowning a sharp, bony spur from a hairless scalp, a round head, a pumpkin head, with a hole in it. It was coming towards me. Please let it be a costume. Please, why can't anyone see it isn't? Why can't anyone see the hole in its head gnawed by slugs, juices leaking from it, seeds visible just like the brains and fragments of? I ran before anyone could ask me what I was staring at. I stumbled out the back door, into a dark lane between houses. I had to lean over a bend to throw up my drinks before I could gather the breath to run. That's when I saw the pumpkin placed down behind the bin, where no one would see it. Immaculately carved, candle lit, a smile all for my eyes only. The door opened behind me, and I bolted before I could see if it was the pumpkin thing. I don't recall the rest of the night. I reckon my intoxication might be what saved me. I awoke in a hospital, head pounding and mouth dry. I had been found passed out on a street corner nearby, having tripped while running and hitting my head on a doorstep. Any fear I felt from the night before was replaced with shame and guilt from how I acted in front of my friends, and from what my mother would think knowing I nearly shared the same fate as my brother. After my second brush with death and the pumpkin thing, I decided to take some time to look after myself. I became a homebody, doing lots of self-care and getting to know my mind and body. I made peace with a lot of things in that time. My guilt, my fears, all that I had lost due to them. My friends regularly came to visit, and for a time things were looking up. Until one evening, I heard a bang downstairs as I was heading to bed. Gently I crept downstairs, wary of turning the lights on for fear of giving my position away to any intruders. A warm light shone through the crack of the kitchen door. I hadn't left any lights on. I pushed the door open as silently as I could. In that instant, all the fears of my past, that I thought I had gained some mastery over, flooded through me. My heart hammered in my chest, and my throat tightened so much that I couldn't swallow what little spit was left in my now dry mouth. On my kitchen table sat a pumpkin, rotten and sagging. Patches of white mold lined the stubborn smile that clung to its mushy mouth, and fat slugs oozed across what remained of its scalp. A candle burned inside, bright still, but flickering as the flames sizzled the dripping mush of the pumpkin's fetid flesh. A footstep slapped against the floor behind me, preceded by the smell of decay, as I knew it surely would the moment I laid eyes upon the pumpkin. This time I was ready. I turned in time to take the thing head-on. A frail and rotten form fell onto me, feebly whipping fingers of root and bone at my face. I shielded myself, but the old nails and thorny roots that made up its hands bit deep despite how feeble the creature seemed. Panting for breath as adrenaline flooded my blood, a stinking pile of the thing's flesh sloughed off right into my gasping mouth. I coughed and retched, but it was too late. I had swallowed in my panic. Rage gripped me, replacing my disgust as I prepared to mount my own assault. I could see glimpses of it between my arms, a rotten, shrunken thing, wrinkled by age and decay, barely able to see me at all. Halloween had long since passed, and soon it seemed. So with this thing I would see to that myself. I seized it, struggling with the last reserves of its mad strength, and wrestled it to the ground. I gripped the bony spur protruding from its scalp, and time seemed to stop. I looked down upon the thing, upon this creature that had haunted me for months, this creature that stood for all that haunted me for my entire life. The guilt, the shame, the fear, lost time and lost experiences, all that I had confronted since my brushes with death came to stand before me and to test me as I held the creature's life in my hands. I would not be found wanting. With a roar of thoughtless emotion, I slammed the creature's head into the floor. A sickening thud marked the first impact of many. Over and over again I slammed the rotten mess into the ground, releasing decades of bottled emotion. Catharsis with each crack, release with each repeated blow. Soon only fetid juices, smashed slugs, and pumpkin seeds were all that remained of the creature. The sight did not upset me. It did not bring back haunting memories, did not bring back the guilt or the shame or the fear. They were just pumpkin seeds, seeds from a smashed pumpkin. The following June, I planted those same seeds. I felt they were symbolic. I would take something that had caused me so much anguish and turn them into a force of creation. I would nurture my own pumpkins, and I've attended a lot of therapy, and I'm making great progress. I'm even starting to enjoy Halloween now. I even grew my hair out again. Stupid little cow's lick and all. It doesn't look quite so stupid on my adult head, and I kept the weight off too, which helps. One morning, however, I was combing my hair, keeping that tuft of hair in check. My comb caught on something. I struggled to push the comb through, but the knot of hair was too thick. Frustrated, I wrangled the hair in the mirror to see what the obstruction was. I parted my hair and saw a bony spur jutting from my scalp. Twisted and sharp, my heart pounded, fear gripping me as my mind raced. How can this be? How can this be happening after everything was done with? Then I remembered the final attack, the chunk of rotting flesh that fell into my mouth, the chunk I swallowed, the slugs, the seeds. I was worried about the pumpkin patch, but I should have worried about my own body. Nausea overcame me as I thought of all these months having gone by with whatever remained of that thing slowly gestating inside me in ways that made no sense at all. I vomited as everything hit me, rendering all my growth and progress for naught. Gasping, I stared in dumb shock at what lay in the sink. Bright orange juices mixed with my own bile. Bright orange juices, bile, and pumpkin seeds. Share your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of today's story? Let us know below. If you enjoyed discovering new tales, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more.